Welcome to the first Masterclass from the European Open Source Academy. In these sessions, we are going to look at building and sustaining open source impact. In other words, let's figure out how open source business owners and corporate users can drive the change. My name is Amandine Pape. I am the head of section for business and impact at the European Open Source Academy. I am also the co-founder of Matrix, which is an open, decentralized, and secure real-time communication standard. Matrix is an open source project which is managed by a non-profit foundation called the Matrix.org Foundation. I am also the COO and co-founder of Element, which is a for-profit business built by the founding team of Matrix to build Matrix-based products. Open source is as old as computer science, and it is everywhere. You find it on your smartphone and all the way to space exploration. Yet it's only in the last few years that we have seen take place and take a seat at a much wider household table. We're now seeing it widely mentioned in digital strategy documents, both in public and private sector, as well as around the political discourse. One reason for it is the realization that whilst proprietary intellectual property is valuable, building on top of open building blocks allows one to focus on their expertise and the differentiation rather than reinventing the wheel. The other realization is as the world becomes more and more reliant on digital data and digital processes, you want to keep control of this. You want sovereignty over your data, you want sovereignty around your processes. And open source software and hardware play a key role in this sovereignty. So how do we ensure that the open source has the societal and economical impact that it can reach? How can open source entrepreneurs be successful when competing with big, closed giants and facing the free riding trend? And how can corporate and public sector users support the ecosystem to help it help them? These are the sort of questions that this masterclass is going to try to answer. So we're going to do that via about 7 lessons. The first one is going to look at the story of Matrix and Element because it's basically a real-life example of first building both an open source project and an open source company, then sustaining them, hopefully, and seeing the impact that they have been having on the world. Then we will look at recognizing the open source opportunity. It has 2 sides. On one side, understand the impact that open source had in the world, and also what is the opportunity for the business owners and for procurement. Lesson 2 will look at the foundational elements of the successful open source business. So basically, what do you need to get right? What are the first steps that you need to take so that your business is built on something solid? Lesson 3 will look at leveraging the right enablers. So depending on where you're coming from and where you're going, what are the levers that you need to pull in order to make your business work and be successful? And following that, finding the business model that works, because once you have the levers, then you can set up the right business model to make sure the business is actually sustainable. Then we will move into the other side of the world. So we'll navigate the corporate buyer's dilemma. How help them understand what the ecosystem needs, help them understand how they can help the ecosystem, and show everyone both sides of the story. And eventually, with the final lessons, we'll look at driving the open source impact through procurement and policy. So the story of Matrix and Element. We have been working on Matrix for more than 11 years, and it's been a great example of what we're going to look at in this session. As I said, it's a real-life example of first building the open source project and the open source business, sustaining them, and seeing the impact that they've been having on the world through various dimensions. So Matrix, the goal of Matrix is actually to be the missing communication layer of the open web. It's used a lot for chat use cases, voice and video, but in the end, it's synchronizing in a decentralized and secure manner any type of data across different deployments. It has the decentralized structure, means that everyone can have their own communication platform deployed wherever they want, and you can build different clients, like Element is one of them, but there are a lot of others which are connected to the servers, and everyone can communicate in a big network. A bit like email in the end, where you create an account on the server and then you can email someone who is using a different server in a big open network. The project is managed by the non-profit foundation called the Matrix.org Foundation. And today, the public Matrix network has 180 million users. Some of them have created a Matrix account, and some of them are actually brought up from existing communication networks like Teams or WhatsApp and communicating with the native users. It is a big open source project. There are many repositories for the code on GitHub, and rough count of stars, if we can consider it as a way to gauge the size of an open source project, about 60,000 stars across the board. We have people building all sorts of additional projects on top of Matrix. Some of them are building servers, SDKs, application services, applications, and it's a big, vibrant ecosystem of contributors. In terms of who is actually using Matrix, as you can see, there are two big trends based on the logos behind here. One of them is public sector, who are very keen these days to keep control over the communications. Also a lot of open source projects who like the openness and feel affiliated to what we're trying to do here. In terms of the vibrant ecosystem, you can see the few logos of people who are either building on top of Matrix or selling Matrix products and services. So Element is the leading Matrix vendor and contributors. It has been supporting the project since the get-go, given it's the same team who set it up. And Element actually built the flagship chat app for Matrix, which is messenger or collaboration application, which will give you both the decentralization, because it is based on the Matrix network, so you control where your data is stored. It is secure because end-to-end encryption is enabled by default, and of course, open source, so that you, as a user and as a customer, you don't have the vendor lock-in, and if you want to change your application to use your Matrix deployment, you can. Element also sells performant and compliant Matrix infrastructure, and we'll get into more details shortly. In terms of the company itself, it's about 90 people, 4 legal entities in various countries. We did raise venture capital funding, and you will understand why. And we had to get some accreditation because we're working with public sector, who are the main users, the main market for Element right now. And we partner a lot with big names as well, who help us sell into this public sector. So let's look at Element's product structure, the product stack. It's not going to be a completely exhaustive list of Element's product, but the idea is to understand what are the layers of the stack that are provided by Element, which are open source, which are not, and what is the difference between them. So first, starting with the Synapse, which is basically the Matrix server that Element develops. It's developed, it is open source under the AGPL v3 license. And the idea is that Synapse can enable a basic messenger use case. So you deploy it, you can use any Matrix application to actually communicate and have the basic set of features that a WhatsApp or a Signal will allow you to have. Then we have its counterpart, which is called Synapse Pro, where basically there are a few proprietary modules coming on top, which is going to help make it more performant and more scalable. So a lot of the big public sector deployments have hundreds of thousands, millions of users, and we had to improve the way the server works to support this. And on the other hand, other customers are looking at deploying many, so thousands, tens of thousands of small, very small deployments. And same thing, you need to make sure that this is supported. Then we provide Element Server Suite, which has a community version. The idea is that it's an operator for the server. It allows you to administrate it easily. It also comes under the AGPL license. And it's based on Kubernetes. Then there is the Element Server Suite Pro, which enables a lot of the enterprise features, because public sectors and corporate users will want to make sure they are compliant, they will want to make sure that they can control what their users do. Maybe they need to be able to audit what is happening or integrate with a directory system, etc., etc. So this is building on top of the Element Server Suite product to add and enable some of these enterprise features that the consumer do not care about. Then there is the SDK, it's a Matrix Rust SDK, which is developed by Element. It is entirely donated to the foundation, and anything written on it gets the Matrix copyright. And it's open source, of course, but this time under the Apache v2 license. And then on top, the Element application itself. So that would be web and iOS and Android and desktop. It's open source under AGPL, and it's trying to basically gives you feature parity with a WhatsApp, a Signal, a Teams, and that's what we're aiming for, a baseline of be able to replace any existing messenger application that the users are already using, or baseline collaboration tools that people are already using. And then you get Element Pro, which will work when connected to the Element Server Suite Pro to actually get all these enterprise features enabled client side too. It will also allow you to provide some branding, and then when you connect using your work email address, it will connect to the right server, etc., etc. So the whole sorts of all the features that, again, a corporate user, a professional organization are going to need, but don't matter at all for a wider consumer market. So the founding story, how did we get there? Why did we do the choices we actually made in the end? And where does all this come from? Started about 20 years ago with two startups, one in France, one in the UK, one focusing, having a kind of VoIP Black Ops team in London, and a team specialized in mobile development in Rennes. So that means that basically a few members in the company are actually been working together for 20 years. So from the get-go, we were having a professional team used to work together and used to actually deliver professional software. So both startups ended up getting acquired by a corporation called Amdocs in 2010, and then ended up in the same business unit, which is when we started working together. Matthew, my co-founder, and myself set up a business unit called Amdocs Unified Communications. It was pretty much working as an incubated startup with about 15 people within the digital services unit, pretty independent, and we were selling white-labeled messaging apps to the telcos. Except in the end, what happened is we ended up competing a lot with WhatsApp, and then ended up having our customers have a split website with, on one side, 0 rated data for WhatsApp, and on the other side, a big advertisement for the branded app that we were selling them, which was pretty depressing. So we ended up convincing Amdocs, the corporation we were working for, to actually try to disrupt their own industry. So they were living off SMS fees, they were living off doing the billing of big telecom operators like AT&T. But in the end, everything like the SMS revenue of the telcos have been dropping like crazy because people were just using WhatsApp. So the idea was to come up with a matrix and say, this is the next generation, the fact that the world's communications are controlled by proprietary companies, like closed companies, private companies, like WhatsApp or Skype, for that matter, is not sustainable. We need this to be an open network, and that's what Matrix is aiming to do. So they have accepted and funded the project for 3 years under full R&D. So we spent 3 years completely financed by this corporation to build Matrix from the ground up. Once the traction on the Matrix project started to grow and it was really present, we can see corporations building on top of it, and most importantly, the French government started to be interested by it. We realized, well, we knew already, but we realized it was the right time to actually set it free. If we wanted Matrix to be successful, it needed to be independent from any commercial interest. So we decided and get organized to actually set up a spin-off and take the team and set up a whole new company independent from a multi-billion-dollar company, but which was actually focused on building Matrix products. So we span off with 12 people. So from day one, we had to make payroll for 12 people. And that's very important in terms of driving your decisions, in terms of business model, in terms of whether you need to raise money or not. The fact that we're coming from a commercial team who from day one had to pay 12 people is a very important detail. We started by incorporating Element as the for-profit company because it already takes a lot of work to do that. And then it's about a year later that we actually managed to find the time to set up the Matrix Foundation as the independent non-profit, which will ended up getting the control of all the Matrix IP. So it is set up as a UK community of interest company, which is basically a limited company with articles which says you shall not have profit and you need to make sure that you work for the interest of the community and of the project. Eventually, when we started, the company was called New Vector, the app was called Riot, the hosted service was called Modular. So we had a big brand soup, which we solved in 2020 by rebranding everything under Element name, which made it a bit more simpler. The traction for Matrix was continuing to grow, and the foundation has been working hard to actually gain the independence from Element and try to stand on its own feet, because so far Element had been propping financially everything. So last year the foundation managed to set up its first governing board and launch memberships so that it gets some revenue coming in to support its activities. Meanwhile, the revenues for Element were not growing as fast as needed, so we were forced to actually reduce the donations that we were giving away to the foundation, because initially the server was entirely Apache and entirely donated to the foundation. But at some point, having to face the freeloading problem, so we were competing in public sector tenders with companies who were taking our server and reselling it. And obviously it was much cheaper for them because they were not carrying the cost of developing the server. So based on that, we had no choice but as Element say, okay, we have to keep the server for ourselves and put an AGPL license on top of it so that we get a bit of control and we get a bit of support from the companies who are actually benefiting from all the work we are doing. So looking back, when we started all of this, we have a bunch of different objectives. So the first one was to establish Matrix as the open communication layer for the web. So that's why we exist, what we wanted, why we created it. We also needed to set up Element as a profitable, in the sense of we need to have a positive bank balance at the end of the month or the year, rather than burn money. Not in terms of we need to do 60% profit every year. It's literally be positive at the end of the year, and have it as a well-functioning company, something which works nicely and where employees are happy to come and work for. The idea also has been to build the Matrix ecosystem as a $1 trillion market with many, many vendors, because we're trying to build an industry. We're trying to build a new standard for everyone to use, so we need many companies building on top of it. And obviously, we'd love for Element to be the leader of this market, but it doesn't mean have 90% of it. It means, I'm sure, once you have built a $1 trillion market, if you get 10% of it, that's quite a nice company to have. So that were the objectives that we had about a decade ago when we started all this. And so far, we are roughly on track for it, at least some of it. There are a few successes, a few things that we have done right. The traction for Matrix is undeniable, especially as a communication standard for governments, especially in Europe. There is definitely something going on. The foundation is an independent body, so that's good. Element is the leader of the Matrix market. So far, it's fine. And Element has reviewed its focus to actually target a specific market. And you will understand why it's important. So there are definitely a few things that we haven't done right. There's a few things we have been struggling with, and some of them we even are still struggling with. So the first one is that the foundation is not financially viable. It's currently not able to stand on its 2 feet without Element propping it up. So we're working hard to make sure that everyone in the Matrix ecosystem is actually trying to keep it independent and supporting it financially. The second one is that there is no concrete WhatsApp or Signal replacement built on Matrix, which has gone completely viral, because the idea is to ensure that everyone in the world communicates based on an open standard and not through proprietary apps or apps controlled by a single private company. And we haven't succeeded at that yet. The third one is that Element hasn't reached break-even state yet, so we're still losing money every month and every year. We still haven't found the right business model against the freeloading. Well, a lot of people have been trying for many, many years. Well, we're still in the same boat so far. We've been forced to implement value capture systems that we didn't want to implement initially, and we were really hoping to avoid, but we had no choice. And the Element market focus came in very late in the game. So what have we learned? First, that an open source organization business model will depend on the circumstances it's been created. Each open source project and target market has a very specific set of constraints. So it can be the organization, it could be in terms of regulation, the team experience, and all of this is going to drive the business model choice that you're going to make. So, for example, needing to make payroll from day one for a team, or starting from a project, starting an open source project which was created by an already existing team working professionally together. In a team which has a professional services DNA as opposed to product building DNA. It's quite a different mindset. And then when you're building a project which is serving consumer or professional, you're not going to attack it from the same angles. The second thing we learned is the need for focus. When building an open source company, focus is as important, if not more, than when you are building a conventional company. So first, you need to start by nailing one single, very narrow market before expanding into a new one. It's even more important and even more complicated in an open source business because by default, you will have a whole bunch of people picking up the project and starting to play with it and deploy it everywhere, which is great in terms of the vibrancy of the ecosystem, in terms of trying to build a product which is sold in a repeatable manner and that you can focus with the right features. Is very complicated when you have a government, a healthcare company, a defense company wanting to do peer-to-peer, etc., etc. And because in the end, even when you're trying to build a chat application is very wide. It can be chat, as in messenger use case. Are you going to prioritize the custom emoji set? Or are you trying to build a collaboration app which requires status and integration with the professional directory? Are you going to sell to governments who need absolutely full open source and on-premise deployment, or a healthcare market which needs very specific set of regulations and protocols to be followed? Or are you going to sell to consumers who want something completely different? So all of these is going to drive how you approach your company and your project. The unforgiving status quo. Well, it's again not news, but the status quo in the market is that there is little correlation between what open source ecosystems need and what organizations who are ready to do to actually support it. And that's a big problem. It's absolutely not new, but it's a big problem. Many organizations still don't understand that they're shooting themselves in the foot by actually trying to use the open source without contributing to it. And all they're doing is helping the proprietary alternatives to be more successful. Procurement teams need to be taught how to buy open source. We need to make sure that the procurement frameworks are adapted to the purchase of open source, and so that all these organizations help their ecosystem. So in short, we have built something which is relatively big and relatively impactful, but the sustainability bit of it is definitely not in place yet. We have learned a lot, still learning, and just to summarize the 3 learning we just went through. First, the open source organization's business model depends on your circumstances. Second, when you're building an open source company, focus is as important, if not more, as if you're building a proprietary one. And the status quo in the market is absolutely unforgiving, and there is little correlation between what organizations using open source are ready to do and what open source ecosystems are needing.